So I was reading recently, and somebody had put on a forum this question: is the Christian life supposed to be boring? And there was, as you can imagine, a lot of responses to that, and overwhelmingly the answer, especially from people who aren't Christians, is yeah, it's boring. Matter of fact, in a recent Gallup poll, 68% of people who don't believe in Jesus would describe Christians as boring. So they look at us and they go, boring. They look at Christianity and go, boring. I don't want to add anything else more boring to my life, so I'm not going to pursue this Christianity. Which is so interesting when you think about Jesus. Jesus was never described as boring. Literally, thousands and thousands, 5,000 men, not counting women and children, so you're talking about 10,000 people, got up and followed Jesus. And not like we follow people today. We follow people like, oh, I'm going to follow Jesus. Like I'm following him now on my Twitter account, I'm following him on Facebook, follow Jesus. No, they had to actually get up, go outside, find where he was, and follow him. In the heat, in the elements, and in crowds and crowds of thousands of people who didn't have deodorant because it hadn't been invented yet. And you're standing there, no deodorant, no toothbrush, no nothing, in the crowds, in the heat of the day, listening to this guy and hanging on every word, right? Do you do that if the guy's boring? No shot. No shot at all. Nobody described him as boring. And so what's the disconnect? Because he wasn't boring, and yet they look at Christianity and go, boring. Look at Jesus and Christians, and they're like, Christianity is like, boring. Somebody put it this way. They said, I bet painters who don't paint are bored. They said, I bet dancers who don't dance are bored. And I bet writers who don't write are bored. And then he said, I'm convinced that followers of Jesus who don't follow him anywhere are bored and boring. And the reality is, it's not just people outside of Christianity that would say that Christianity is kind of boring. The reality is many, many, many Christians, if you could get honesty from them, would say that it's boring. And here's why. Followers of Jesus who don't follow him anywhere are bored, because it's not the life that you were intended to have. So I have been talking for weeks about this man's life. He's one of the most influential men in my life today. I read his books regularly. I go back to him usually every January. I go back again and again to the life of Frank Laubach. I read his story over and over again. Frank Laubach was bored with Christianity. He was a missionary in the Philippines in the early 1920s. He was so bored with Christianity on his 46th birthday, he wrote to describe what his life was like, and he used two words: poisonously disappointed. Does that sound bored? I mean, that's way beyond bored. When I describe my life, how many of you would say, I mean, though, if you're being honest, would say that you're really disappointed where life has turned out for you today? And that's how he felt, disappointed. This is not where I should be. This is not what I want. And that's how he felt on his 46th birthday in 1930, and the next 40 years of his life were anything but boring and anything but disappointing. And I've told this story again and again. Please be patient with me as I tell it, because it's so important. In the next 40 years, his influence became worldwide. Encyclopedia Britannica said he was perhaps the single greatest educator of modern times. He was voted Man of Year in America. He wrote over 50 books. He taught 60 million people to read in their own language. His influence was extended to poverty issues, injustice issues, illiteracy issues all around the world. He met with presidents and world leaders all over the globe. It's like, what in the world happened in 1930 at the age of 46 that changed this man's life? And if you've heard me in the last 4 weeks, I've talked about it again and again. At the age of 46, he decided to try a new experiment. A different way of praying. And what he would do is every single day, what he wanted to is every 15 minutes, is how he started. Every 15 minutes or every half hour, he wanted to redirect his attention back to God and make himself available to do whatever God wanted him to do in that moment. And his prayer was simple. It was, Father, what would you like said in this moment, and what would you like done in this moment? How simple is that? What would you like said in this moment, and what would you like done in this moment? He had no idea that simple little prayer would begin to change his life every 15 minutes. And then eventually in life, he got to the point where he was trying to do it one time per minute all day long. And here's how he described what happened. 30 days after he started, He said, 30 days, I've already felt a joy that I have never experienced in 16 years of being a Christian. How many of you would use words this morning to describe your Christian faith as joy-filled? I mean, just full of joy. So this sense of cooperating with God, and I love this phrase, in little things, is what so astonishes me. That's how he'll start. You will have a partnership with God that is just a sense of cooperating with God in little things. It's not like tomorrow, if you start this experiment, he'll put you in front of the president, or he'll let you, it's just little things, and little things, and little things, and little things. He says, this sense of cooperating with God in little things is what astonishes me. I need something and turn around, I find it waiting for me. Is that how your life feels like it goes? You need something, turn around, and it's not there, right? That's more common, and you don't even remember why you turned around half the time. But he said, I must work, and to be sure there is God working along with me. Is that how you feel like life is working for you today? Like God is working with you every day of your life? You have a partnership with God, this new connection with God, and it's dynamic. Is that how you feel? He said, I need to work to be sure, but there is God working along with me. God takes care of all the rest. 60 days after he started this experiment, every 15 minutes is how he started. 15 minutes, 30 minutes, he would try and think and say to God, is there anything you want me to say? Is there anything you want me to do? Just so simple. He said, 60 days in, he said, I find several things happening because of these 2 months. This concentration upon God is strenuous, so it's hard to do, but everything else has ceased to be hard. He said, I think more clearly, I forget less frequently. That alone would be worth a lot, right? Just to forget less. He said, that things I did with a strain before, I now do easily with no effort whatsoever. I worry about nothing, and I lose no sleep. Good night. How many Americans can say that? How many American Christians can say that? I worry about nothing. Because the sense of God's partnership is so strong and so overwhelming. He said, the moment I turn to him, listen to this, it's like turning on an electric current which I feel through my whole being. You ever had that experience with God? He would use words, Frank Laubach would use words to describe his Christianity as thrilling, challenging, electrifying, joy-filled, and exciting. Would you? Would you? What if what he was experiencing is what God wants us to experience? I keep coming back to this because I know the answer is that's what he wants. It's what he wants for me, and it's what he wants for every single person that wants to follow Jesus. So we're in this series called Great Expectations, and I said when I started this is about learning to expect great things from God. That's what I want for you. I want you to wake up every day with a sense of anticipation that keeps growing because you just are expecting to see God at work in this day. That's what I want for you. And so for many people, they're like, I'm just looking for something more. I know there has to be more to this God stuff than just what I have. I want to show you what that requires. So please open your program, grab your notes inside. Welcome to those you're watching online, whatever place you are. If you're at our website at PenndaleChurchLife.com, we're glad you're there. You have these notes. I really, really want to ask you to consider taking the notes out and following along as we get it through this. And we're just going to talk about two things. If you're looking for more in your relationship with God, you want something and it beyond what you have, then the first thing I want to do is direct your attention right to Jesus. And I have never put so many verses in one section below, and I could have put even more, and I just picked these. Again, we have to look at Jesus. He is the one that we follow. When people would go and follow Jesus, literally follow him, and they'd come back and tell their neighbors, they would say things like this about Jesus. He's so powerful. I mean, he just says the word and diseases are gone. So powerful, and he's loving and compassionate and kind and challenging and convicting and merciful and gracious, right? If you've ever read anything in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you know that those are the words that people would use when they describe Jesus. So what was it that allowed him to see so much life change in his life? Well, it's like, well, he's the Son of God, so he can do what he wants. It's more than that. Look at what Jesus said, again, he is the one that we follow. We follow Jesus. If you come here and you've put your faith in Jesus, you don't follow me. Do not follow me, follow Jesus. He's the key. So look at what Jesus said about what was going on in his life. And I'm not going to explain these, I'm just going to show you. Jesus said, my nourishment, what feeds his soul, he said, it comes from doing the will of God who sent me and from finishing his work. And then he said, I can do nothing on my own. I judge as God tells me, therefore my judgment is just, because I carry out the will of the one who sent me, not my own will. I have come down from heaven to do the will of God who sent me, not to do my own will. Starting to hear the pattern? The night before he was to go to the cross, he prayed this, Father, if you're willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me, yet I want your will to be done, not mine. And finally, in Matthew 6:10, your kingdom come, the prayer that he taught his disciples to pray, that so many of us have prayed 1,000 times in our lifetime. You know, I'm used to it in the King James, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. That's how I learned it when I was young. This is a more modern version of that translation, that your kingdom come, and what are we supposed to pray? Your will be done. These are just a few of the many verses in the New Testament I could have put up here. Do you hear the pattern? Jesus, when it came to the will of God, he prayed about the will of God, he sought the will of God, he carried out the will of God, he obeyed the will of God, he sacrificed for the will of God. And if you read anything about the life of Jesus, you really have to read with blinders on not to realize that the will of God was his number one priority in life. Number one, what he wanted over and over again was the will of God, the will of God. So what he wanted was, here's what the Father wants, and he wanted his will in perfect alignment. So whatever the Father wants, that's what he wanted to do. And by the way, some people have real questions about the character of God. Look at how Jesus lived. What did Jesus run around doing? Healing people and serving people and caring for people and loving on people. Guess what the will of the Father is that he wants to do in this world through his followers? He wants to use us to love on people and serve people and help people and care for people, because that's his will. And Jesus wanted his will to line up exactly with the will of the Father. So that's how Jesus lived. My question to you is, how much time did you spend last week even thinking about the will of God? It was his number one priority. It's what he thought about all the time. It completely nourished his soul. It brought satisfaction and contentment to him to do the will of God. How much time did you spend last week even thinking about the will of God? Here's what I believe and why I'm telling you this. I think that for most Christians, the number one and greatest source of disappointment in our world comes every time we step out of alignment with the will of God. That's what I believe. I believe that the most disappointed Christians today, the ones who don't pray, that are falling away from their faith, that what's at the root of that, for most of them, is this dynamic right here. That we have bought into the American mindset of, it's really about me, and God is just kind of there to do whatever I want. And we've brought that into our Christian faith. Matter of fact, I think that what we've done is rewritten the Lord's Prayer. So we would say it this way as American Christians: Our Father in heaven, may your name be kept holy. I don't really think about your kingdom coming. And may my will be done on earth. And I'm not even really going to think about heaven. Unless it's a funeral, then I'll think about it. Okay, now that may not relate to you, but I think most Christians I know spent no time thinking last week about the kingdom of God. None. Zero. I mean, you can just do some honest self-evaluation. How many minutes did you spend last week thinking about your kingdom coming? Most Christians, the answer is zero. How much time did you spend thinking about heaven last week? Unless it was a funeral, probably zero, right? And how much time did you spend last week thinking about the will of God last week? Most Christians, zero. It's like, can he be more clear about what we're supposed to be praying about every day? And every time in my life, I've done this wrong. Every time in my life, and I do this wrong all the time. Every time I've done this wrong in my life, pain is the outcome of this. Every single time. So I can give you lots of stories about this. When I was graduating from high school, I was pretty sure I wanted to be a pastor, and so I began to look at attending Christian colleges that had a pastoral studies major program. So I wanted to go study and be a pastor, but I also wanted to keep wrestling, because I was a wrestler from 4th grade on, loved wrestling. It was my true love. It was wrestling. So I wanted a Christian school with a pastoral studies major and a college wrestling program. Now, in 1988, when I was looking to go to college, there were very few of those in the country. Very few. But there was one in the Twin Cities. One of the most expensive colleges I could ever attend, but at least they had the wrestling program. We were not rich. I could not afford this. But it was about, that sentence, God, may my will be done. That's what I was praying. I want this, and I'm not going to be told no. You ever done that with God? You're not even going to ask him what his will is, because you want what you want, and you're just going to make it happen. So I did. Made it happen. Got into that college. Had a horrible experience with my roommates. It was bad. They did not share the same faith I shared at a Christian school. It was a Christian liberal arts school. Whew! I mean, one of them had a nearly pornographic poster hanging on the wall when I walked into my room, and it's like, oh my, where am I at? It's like, so then got to the wrestling program, started the wrestling season the very first week. I hurt my back, and I hurt it so bad, I've never been able to wrestle competitively since. Never. And I learned a huge lesson as I was recovering. Matter of fact, to this day, it still affects me. That back injury I got that first week still affects me to this day. And I've never lost sight, because eventually, once the wrestling was out of the picture, that's when I finally began to say to God what I should have been saying all along. Hey, God, what would you like me to do? Where do you want me to go to school? Because now I'm open to that. Before I wasn't. So many times in my life, the pain that I'm experiencing is rooted in this misalignment. I am telling God what he will do. I am not asking him for what he wants me to do. And it will always, 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 always cause you pain. Emotional pain, sometimes physical pain. And could that be the source of what's going on in your life right now? Because some of you, you're just not happy. And it is not turning out the way you want. And it's because of this misalignment. So what do? You do this. You make God's will your number one priority. It's what we have to learn how to do. I make God's will my number one priority. The most important thing to me is the will of God, doing the will of God. It is what I have to become obsessed about. There's no question that's how Jesus lived his life. None. He lived his life with one thought: what is the will of my Father? That's what I'm going to do all the time. And he was open to it, and he did it. So we have to learn to do that. And by the way, take a look at what Jesus promised then. Did you know he said this to his followers? He said, by the way, my Father is ready to hear those who worship him and do his will. Could this be why for some of you, prayer just seems so empty? Jesus said, it's conditional. My Father's just waiting, and he will listen if, worship is the idea of putting him in that first spot. It's who's of highest worth. And then I'm committed to doing his will. It's conditional. What if this is why prayers aren't being answered in your life? It's because you really don't care about doing his will. You're just telling him what you want him to do, and his will doesn't really matter to you. So how do we get into this point where we are aligned with God? First, you have to make the decision to fully surrender your future to him. Oh, this is so hard. Oh my, I just told you about how I blew it. It's not the only time I've blown it. Not even close. I have blown this again and again in my life. I could tell you so many stories about this. Fully surrender our future to him. Here's what I want you to understand about God. Did you know that God operates from a plan? Did you know that? Again and again in the Bible he says he has a plan, he is acting out of this plan, and you and I fit into his plan at different points along the way. Did you know that? It's about the plan of God unfolding in this world, and instead what we like to do is make it about our plan. And it's not about our plan. That's why you see things like this in the Bible. In Romans chapter 12, verse 1, Paul wrote to the church in Rome and said, dear friends, God is good. So look at this. I beg you to offer your bodies to him as a living sacrifice, pure and pleasing. It's the most sensible way to serve God, which is what it's all about. The problem with a living sacrifice, if you think about an Old Testament sacrificial system, they would put the animal on the altar, and then they would. All right? So he's like, I want you to offer yourself as a living sacrifice. The problem with living sacrifices is they can get right off that altar, right? I can crawl up on here today and crawl right off there tomorrow. So and this is the battle. It is a daily, constant battle between the will of the Father and my will. And he says, I'm begging you. to offer yourself constantly to him so that it's about him and his plan unfolding in this world. So what does this sound like? I've talked about this guy before, and I've shown you pictures of him before. His name is Nick Vukovic. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the last name right, but you can see, born without legs and without arms. Tremendous disability in life. He faced all kinds of obstacles. Today he's a highly sought after motivational speaker. Speaks all around the country. And he's also a very devout follower of Jesus. And one time I was reading about him, he said this, he really, really wanted to be married. And he wrote this, he said, "I don't need a wife, but I want to be married. And God knew this was a desire of my heart, but I had to come, listen to this, I had to come to a point in my relationship with Jesus where I would say, God, if you want me single for the rest of my life, I will still serve you and I will still worship you." That's what full surrender sounds like. It's like, here's what I want, Father. I want this. But you know what? This is about your will being done in this world. And if you want me single for the rest of my life, then I will stay single for the rest of my life. It's just like the story I told last week in last week's message. There was this woman named Catherine. She was sick. So sick with tuberculosis years and years and years ago. This was such a serious illness. She couldn't get out of bed. She couldn't take care of her infant child. And she begged God to heal her. Begged and begged and begged. And God said, no, there was no healing. It didn't go on for days. It didn't go on for weeks. It went on for months. Bedridden, unable to do anything. Can you imagine that? Being sick for months, unable to get out of bed. And she kept praying until finally she reached that point of surrender. In one of my favorite prayers ever, she said this, Lord, I've done everything I know how to do, but it hasn't been good enough. I'm tired of struggling with your will. Oh, some of you, that's the sentence you need to get to. I'm tired of struggling with your will, she said. I'm tired of trying to get from you what I want. Are you tired? Are you tired of trying to get from God what you want? She said, I'm through. She said, if you want me to be an invalid all the rest of my life and stay right in this bed until death comes, here I am. I'm ready. Do anything you like with me and my life. And that's what surrender sounds like. It's like, I accept this. It's not what I want. What I would like is that you take this away. But if you choose not to, I accept that from your hand. From now on, it's about your will, not mine. By the way, in the story, that's when God healed her. That's often when you see the greatest displays of God's power in your life is when you reach that point of surrender. Now, most Christians really have a problem with the word surrender, and not just because we're Americans, we don't surrender to anybody, right? We also fear it. I cannot tell you how many times in 29 years of talking to Christians, they've been so afraid of this concept of surrender because what they automatically think is, oh no, if I surrender my future to God, my singleness or my relationships or my money or my career, you know what he's going to make me do? He's going to make me quit my job, he's going to make me go live in a hut in Africa, and I'm going to eat bugs for the rest of my short existence in miserable dirt. That's what God wants for me. I cannot tell you how many Christians fear this. They fear it so much because they just are so afraid of what God's plan is for them. And my whole attitude shifted on this a year ago. I was listening to a podcast from one of my favorite pastors, Andy Stanley. And he was talking about this. Matter of fact, it was so good, I hit pause, ran and got a piece of paper, and wrote it all down. And because I just kept rewinding until I got it all down, word for word. He said this. He said, what does a good parent want from their children? What does a good parent want from their children? Nothing. A good parent doesn't want something from their kids. Good parents want stuff for their kids, right? Isn't that a good parent? He went on to say, when you see parents on TV trying to get something from their kids, how does that make you feel? Trying to use their kids to get ahead or get success through their kids. How does that make you feel? Good? No, we're all disgusted by it. You don't use your kids to get something for you. No good parent wants that. He said, great parents want things for their kids, not from it. And then he said, your heavenly Father wants something for you, not from you. He's not waiting for you to surrender so he can take away all the good things in your life. Finally, I got him. Now everything's gone from you. It's like, where do we get this concept? And he said, well, by the way, we got that from the church. And it's not true at all. He said the whole idea of surrendering to God scares us because we think God will leave us unhappy and unfulfilled, and it is completely a lie. It is the opposite of true. You just think about it. I am a very flawed dad. I've talked about this many times. I have 6 kids. I absolutely love spending time with my 6 kids. When I get to even just talk with them on the phone, I enjoy being with them. And you know what I want from my kids? All of them are grown and gone. My youngest is 21. You know what I want from my kids? I want nothing from my kids. Nothing. You think I care about my birthday presents or Christmas presents from them? Not at all. I don't want anything from them. I want relationships with them all. I want to be with them and spend time with them. But the happiest moments in my life as a dad are when my kids are winning. When my kids are thriving. When my kids' marriages are going good. And when they're thriving at work. And thriving financially, and thriving spiritually, there is this peace that settles over me as a dad, and it is like nothing else. And I am one flawed, screwed up human being. A perfect Father in heaven only wants good things for you. He's not waiting for you to surrender so he can take something from you. Do you know you can trust him with your future? Do you know you can trust him with your future? Second part of this prioritizing God's will is to begin to pray with God's will in mind. And he talks specifically about this in the book of James. He actually tells us how to pray. He said what we tend to do is we tell God our plans. We say, or we just talk about our plans as if God isn't even involved. Tomorrow I'm going to go here, Wednesday I'm going to go here, Friday I'm going to go here, I'm going to do this and this and this. And he said, stop, that's not how you do it anymore. He said, here's how I want you to pray. You pray with, if it's the Lord's will, then we'll live and we'll do this or we'll do that. So the prioritization of the will of God means that I begin to say, according to God, Lord willing, I'll be able to do this. I'll be able to do this. I'll do this on Thursday, I'll do this on Saturday, Lord willing. And the idea of that is that you are, again, submitting your will to the will of the Father. It's just how Jesus prayed in the garden, and I already showed you this. When he didn't want to go to the cross the next day, he said, if it's possible, Father, let this cup of suffering be taken from me again, but I want your will to be done, not mine. That's praying with the will of God in mind. So when we're praying for someone's healing, we ask God to heal them and say, but your will be done. Your will is what we want. When we're praying for God to give someone a job, because they really need a job, we're saying, Father, here's what we're asking, but your will be done. If this isn't your plan for this person, then we submit to you. And there's the will of God acknowledged in our prayers. We make decisions based on the will of God. That's how Jesus did it. We make decisions based on the will of God. And there are 2 aspects to this. The first is what he's already revealed. We call this the revealed will of God. Do you know that you never need to pray and say, God, is it okay if I lie to my boss tomorrow because I just don't want to go to work? Answer, no. He's already made that clear. Lying is not a part of following Jesus. Don't do it, right? So there are certain things like don't steal, don't lie, don't cheat, don't do these things. They're not right for you if you follow Jesus. So it's like he's already revealed that. But then there are times when you don't know what decision to make. Let's say that you get a job offer tomorrow. And it's a really good job offer. Now you need God to reveal his will to you about this decision. And so you're depending on him when you have decisions to make, and all of us have decisions to make every single year. You may not be in the middle of one now, but you will be. If you flip your notes over in the back, another one of my heroes in the faith, besides Frank Laubach, is a man named George Mueller, and I'm not talking about him today, but he had a 6-point strategy anytime you had a decision to make, and I talk about this regularly, and I wasn't planning to teach on it in this series, but maybe I will. The first one is the most important. Just look at on the back of your notes, the first one. He said the most important thing he learned was get your will out of the way. That's the number one principle. He said 90% of all of his problems were over the moment he did this. So getting your will out of the way means this. It means, we call it neutralizing your will. You say to God, hey God, I got this job offer from this other company. It seems pretty good. Better pay, better hours. Okay. So God, I'd like to say yes to this, but I'm setting aside my will. What do you want? I'll say yes to this. I'll say no to this. You just show me what you want. That's what he was saying. How many of your decisions do you think you make that way? How many of your decisions do you think you make by neutralizing your will first and saying, God, you show me yes or no, and I'll say whatever you want? You ever gone down a path that you thought would be a good path for you, and it caused more heartbreak and pain than you could imagine? We don't see the end of the path, God does, and he's made an incredible promise. Look at this promise. If you trust in the Lord with all your heart, stop depending on your own understanding. If you, look at this, seek his will in all that you do, look what he will do. He will show you which path to take. And he will keep you from getting hurt and going down the wrong path. And some of you really need to know that right now. Because you're telling God what you're going to do and asking him to bless it. And that'll never work. If you are at that point of disappointment with God, disappointment with Christianity, it is almost always because you went down a path he never wanted you to go down in the first place. But you never asked him up front. You didn't even care. You wanted it, you took it, you got it. And it brought you somewhere painful. And what we do then, over and over again, I've done it too, is then we get mad at God. It's like, you have allowed all this pain in my life. And he's sitting there going, I never even wanted you to put a foot on that path. And if you'd asked me one time, I'd have said emphatically no, but you just did what you wanted to do, and now you're in this spot, and you're mad at me. Because the truth is, the will of God just doesn't matter in America today. The most marketed to in society has been told 1 billion times in our lifetime, it's all about you. It is all about you. And we believe it, and we bring it into our Christianity. And it's not about us. And it screws us all up. And then to really have the adventure that God has for you, you have to have this last one. Start to listen for daily promptings from God. And this is where my whole life is really changing, why I'm so excited to talk to you about this again and again, week after week. You start listening for daily promptings from God. Jesus talked about the fact that people who follow him, he called them the sheep. He's the shepherd. He's the good shepherd. He'll lead us only in good places. He said, my sheep, they will learn to listen for my voice. And I actually fully believe in a God who speaks today, who will guide you and prompt you and direct you. If you will listen at all, he will do things in your life that you could never do if you learn to listen to his voice. So I've talked about this for 4 weeks now, for 4 straight weeks. It was 4 weeks ago, I was rereading Frank Laubach's material, and I saw that prayer, and he said, all he started doing every 15 minutes to 30 minutes a day was just to say, Father, what do you want said in this moment? What do you want done in this moment? And I'm like, I am starting this again. Because I've started at different times in my life, but I had all these other things I was adding to that. And I'm like, I'm keeping it simple. It is about one thing. It's about the will of God in this moment. That's it. I'm not adding anything else to that. Just the will of God. 4 weeks ago. And my goal, every 15 minutes or 30 minutes, just like his was to say this, Father, I'm your servant. So if there's anything you want me to say or do right now, please show me. Please show me. And the first few days were super hard, and I kept losing sight of the question, and then I came across something fantastic. I work at home, I got my desk at home, and so I have this scratch pad in front of me every single day. Every day I write down the time when I turn to him, and I don't write all the times down, and obviously when I'm not working, I still keep doing this, and every single day I just fill these cards up over and over again, and every one of these is a representation of some of the times during that day. I normally put dates. This is Tuesday's day. Some of the times when I would stop, or not even stop, just breathe a prayer to God while I'm talking to somebody. I don't have to stop. It's not like I'm saying, just a second right now, I need to pray. No, you can just hold that thought in your head. I can be talking to you and in my mind saying, Father, is there anything you want me to say to this person right now? Anything you want me to do for this person right now? Yesterday I was in Quick Trip, standing behind this woman who's obviously lived kind of a tough life. She was buying some tobacco, and I was standing behind her, and I was saying, Father, is there anything you want me to say or do for this person right now? Nothing came to mind. I didn't respond to anything, but I was making myself available in that moment, and I wanted. This has been my obsession for 4 weeks. 4 weeks. I keep showing you this every single week so you see I'm still doing it. I'm not stopping it. I will not stop this time. I've stopped in the past because of these other things. I am only trying to live my life according to the will of God now. That's it. I want this. I want to be aligned with whatever the Father wants. Whatever he wants, that's what I want. And 4 weeks ago, I read this verse. It just blew me away. For the first time, I've read it so many times in my life, and it suddenly made sense. And I talked about it 4 weeks ago in the message. It was from Luke chapter 17. Jesus had his disciples say, hey, how do we grow our faith? Because if you can grow your faith, mountains can move. Anything will be possible for those who believe. Anything. Great question to ask Jesus. How do you make our faith grow? And he's like, you're asking the right question. And then he said, here's how you do it. And he told this crazy story. I mean, it's nuts. He said, think about a master-slave relationship. The slave is out in the fields all day long, and there was slavery in their time in Israel. So we're not condoning it. He wasn't condoning it. He was using it as an example. He said, think about a slave out in the fields. They're out in the fields all day long, and they come in, they tend to the crops, they tend to the farm animals, they come inside. It's the end of the day. They're exhausted and hungry and tired, and the master's hungry. What does the master say? Does he say to the slaves, oh, I can see you guys are really tired from a hard day's work. Why don't you just sit down and I'll take care of it? Is that what the master says? Master doesn't say that. The master says, get cleaned up, make me some food, I'm hungry. And so the slaves go and they clean themselves up and they make some food, and then they come and feed the master, and then when everything's done, then they take care of themselves. And then he says, do they expect anything from the master for doing this? No. And the craziest anti-American Christian verse, then he sums it up by saying, in the same way, when you obey me, isn't that an assumption? When you obey me? What is he assuming when he says that phrase? That we're going to obey him, right? In the same way, when you obey me, you should just say, we're unworthy servants who have simply done our duty. Are you kidding me? You can't say that in America. You can't say that. And Jesus is like, and this is where you need to go. It is completely aligned with the will of God. Whatever he wants, you just say yes, and you just do it because that's what you're here to do. And he said, and that's where your faith is transformed. And that's why so few people have any kind of real power in their life, is because this alignment seldom happens. It's because we are constantly telling God what we want. I want to be married. I want to have a family. I want to do this. I want this. I want to live in this house. I want to live in this neighborhood. I want to have this for my money. I want to keep all my money. I want to do whatever I want, and you just have to bless it. And then all we go down these paths, and it just keeps blowing up in our face over and over again, and then we get mad at God because he's not blessing what we're doing. And he never said anything about that. He said this is who I am. I am here as your servant to do your will, period. Not my will. And every time I come out from under alignment, I'm going to bring pain in my life, and I'm sorry. That's what we should be saying is, I'm sorry that I've made it about me. I'm sorry. It's about you. Your will being done. And so what's happened in the last month, and the reason I'm so passionate, continues to grow. This section of my notes, I'm not reading all the details of it to you. Every week grows for 4 weeks. The better I've gotten at this, the more focused I've been on the will of God and doing the will of God and defending the will of God and responding to the will of God. Over and over again. If you start this experiment with me, the first thing he will start doing is he will start prompting you over and over again. Just be prepared. The first few days, super hard to do this. You can't keep it in your mind. You cannot keep it in your mind. It will just keep going out of your mind again and again. You will not be saying, what would you like me to say or do in this moment, Father? So hard to keep it in your mind. And then eventually it starts to just stay. And then I start doing it in the evenings when I don't even have my notebooks or my notes with me. And then I do it on the weekends. And over again. Now this last week was the coolest week with God in terms of over and over again, he kept putting people in my mind. When I would pray that prayer, is there someone you want me to say something to or do something for? Again and again this week, a person's face would pop in my mind. I didn't know their circumstances, didn't have to know it. What does a servant do when the master says do something? They just obey. So I would write them and say, in many cases, I just want you to know I'm praying for you. I hope things are going okay in your life. And so many interesting conversations came out of that. Because it's not my job to figure it out, it's my job just to obey. So many emails, texts, phone calls, as I just try and respond to what the Father's asking me to do moment by moment. And that's nothing compared to what he's done in the last month. You cannot understand what it's, if you do not do this, you don't understand what Frank Laubach was talking about, a partnership with God. It's a partnership. He's working as way more than I'm working. In the last month of doing this, I've seen dramatic answers to prayer. I've seen healings take place. I've seen one of the coolest things that happened this last week. Just blew me away. You know how it is? If you were to put a list of people together that you're like, they are beyond help. All of us have people we've given up on in life. We're done with them. And I had one person on that list. And I've been praying for them. And this last week, I saw something changing in the heart of that person that so surprised me. What a coincidence. It's not a coincidence. He was just waiting for this to happen before he could start doing what he wanted to do. You have people on your list of hopeless people. They are not hopeless to him. He actually can reconnect a human being's heart in any way he wants. He works inside. He can do this. There's nothing beyond him. I've had so many interesting spiritual conversations with people in my life. They just keep coming up. And then some incredible new opportunities in my life. He just opens doors. I don't have to open them. I just have to do this. I just have to align my will with his, and then everything starts to change. And I want that for all of you. I want that for every single one of you. I want you to know what it's like to see God working. I'll tell you the most dramatic thing, what's changed so much, is I can't stop wanting to worship God. In my own home, I can. So I can sing as loud as I want. And sometimes the music just overwhelms me. And this is not normal for me. Anyone who knows me in the past, this isn't my normal spiritual connection point with God. And I can't help but worship him. It is overwhelming to me. Sometimes it just feels like if I don't tell him how grateful I am and how much I love him, that I'm going to explode. And that is amazing to me, and I want more of it. I'm totally addicted to it. It's about him and him alone. So, it's time. It's time for all of us. You're going to see more and more of it. I'm not done showing you. I'm not done with this. You're going to see this. The reason I keep doing this every week is I want you to see it's possible. We can learn to do this together. So, I want to be really clear too. I am not where I need to be yet. I am not fully surrendered. As a matter of fact, I was prepping this message. 2 areas of my life where I am not fully surrendered to God became very clear to me. It's like, oh no, God, they're not in alignment, and I'm not really sure I want to align them. I mean, I'm being honest with you. So he's going to need to do a little work in my heart on those areas. Because it's a little scary sometimes to bring some of those areas under alignment and say, here you go. And there are a couple areas in my life where it's like, that's not right exactly how you want me to say that or do that in this relationship, and I'm sorry, I need to change some things. The cool thing about God is, it doesn't work only when you're perfect. I'm so grateful for that. I am so grateful that he is just like if you were a parent and you were raising a baby, when they first started, and they fell, you cheered and celebrated. You're like, you did something, way to go. He's just like that. He's not like, no, when you march perfectly as a baby, then I'll celebrate you. Not at all. He's just like, any little step in this direction, you get me. That's all you need to do is start in the direction, and he will start working, and you will start experiencing it. If you're a follower of Jesus, get tired of trying to get your way from God. Get tired of that. You've got to get tired of trying to get your way from God, because it is a dead-end path, and it only brings you pain. You have to bring yourself to that point where you are, and that's what this prayer is about, this constant prayer is. It's not about my will, Father. It's about your will being done in this moment. You show me what you want said and done, and the answer is yes. It's yes. Get tired of trying to get your way from God. It is a dead-end path. And remember, you never need to fear a loving Father. He doesn't want things from you. He has things for you. Would you remember that? He doesn't want to take things from you. He just has. I mean, his heart is so much better than my heart as a dad. He just loves you and has such great things for you. Start this experiment with me. Every 15 minutes, make it your your goal to say that prayer. Father, what do you want said or done in this moment? And learn how to say it when you're on a Zoom call meeting with people. And learn how to say it when you run into somebody at the grocery store, or you're standing behind somebody in a line at a Quick Trip. Learn how to say it constantly. And then when you sense, then just respond to it. And you will see what I'm talking about. And I know a lot of people are watching online and they're just exploring their faith with this. I'm so glad you heard this, because I want you to know that Christianity is not ever supposed to be boring. And if it's boring, you are being shown a counterfeit. There's nothing boring about this. It's incredibly challenging and amazing. And for those of you who are watching and you're like exposed to this kind of fake stuff, I apologize. There's a lot of fake Christianity in the world. A lot of it. There's a lot of fake everything in our world right now. But Jesus is real, and he wants a relationship with you, and he wants to put you in the middle of an incredible adventure with him as he unfolds his plan in this world. Let me have you bow your heads. Jesus had to go to the cross. You know, we've quoted that verse twice today about him the night before he was crucified. He did not want to go to the cross, but he knew there was no way for all of us to have the unloving things we've said and done removed and paid for if he didn't pay. That's what was happening 2,000 years ago. The Son of God, the perfect Son of God, gave his life on a cross, and in that moment he paid the debt that we've created. He paid all of that debt, and then he rose again, and anyone who turns to him and puts their faith in him can be completely forgiven. And if you want this relationship with God, not rules, not religion, not something boring, not rituals, if you want a real relationship with him, you start here with a moment of surrender where you say to him, Jesus, I know that I've done unloving things in my lifetime. I know it. But I've heard that you gave your life for me. Would you please forgive me? Come make your home inside of me today. I want a new relationship with you from this day forward. In Jesus' name, amen. As we finish up today, can I ask you, if you're here, just to grab your connection card out of the program. If you're watching online, go to our website, penuelchurchlife.com. There's a Get Connected tab, and we've been hearing from people lately. So loved to hear from you. Let us know about decisions you're making. If you're here, you can let us know if you've asked Jesus to forgive you or renewed your commitment, or if you want us to pray for something. According to the will of God, we will pray for you. According to his will. And then just put this in the offering box, and then if you're again watching online, just let us know how we can pray for you, and we'll do that as well. Thanks so much for coming. We hope to see you again next week as we continue this series.